The massive alien research ship Wisdom's Edge drifted silently through space near Council Station Prime. Commander Zix-9 stood before the main display screen, his blue crystalline skin flickering with worry patterns. The urgent message from the Galactic Council had arrived just hours ago, and its contents troubled him deeply. "Sir, the human fleet has dropped out of hyperspace," reported Science Officer Keth from his station. "They are approaching the station now." Zix-9 watched as 5 human warships appeared on the screen. The largest was the USS Liberty, followed by 4 smaller vessels including the Stormbreaker. The ships looked ordinary enough: metal hulls, weapon arrays, shield generators. Nothing that should cause concern for the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Yet every species in the Galactic Council feared these vessels for one simple reason: they could not be scanned. "Prepare our most advanced scanning array," Zix-9 ordered. "The Council wants us to try again." Dr. Elena Martinez stepped off the transport shuttle onto Council Station Prime. As humanity's first ambassador to the galactic community, she carried the weight of her entire species on her shoulders. The quarterly defense summit was always tense, but today felt different. Admiral Jake Thompson greeted her at the docking bay. He was a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen too many battles. "Elena, good to see you made it safely. Any word from the Council about why they called this emergency session?" Elena asked as they walked through the station's gleaming corridors. "Same old story," Jake replied. "They want answers about our ships. The Vorthak are getting nervous again." Elena sighed. The Vorthak were the galaxy's greatest minds, crystalline beings who could process quantum calculations in their heads. If they were worried, everyone was worried. Captain Lisa Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Stormbreaker, watching the massive space station grow larger on the main screen. She had commanded this destroyer for 3 years, and she still couldn't understand why alien races feared human ships so much. "Captain, we're receiving multiple scan attempts," her communications officer reported. "Xanthari, Vorthak, and Luminari vessels are all trying to read our systems." "Same result as always?" Lisa asked. "Yes, ma'am. Their scanners are shutting down one by one." Lisa shook her head. She had seen this happen dozens of times. Whenever aliens tried to scan human ships, their equipment simply stopped working. Not through jamming or interference. The scanners just refused to function, as if they were afraid of what they might find. On the Xanthari research vessel, Keth activated the most powerful scanning array his people had ever built. The quantum resonance scanner could peer through the densest armor and read the atomic structure of any material. It had never failed before. He aimed it at the approaching USS Liberty and pressed the activation button. For a moment, the scanner worked normally. Energy readings appeared on his screen, showing the basic outline of the human ship. Then something strange happened. The readings began to change, showing impossible numbers that hurt to look at. The display flickered with colors that shouldn't exist and measurements that made no sense. Keth felt a sharp pain in his head as his brain tried to process the information. The numbers on the screen seemed to move and twist, forming patterns that his mind couldn't understand. He reached for the shutdown button, but before he could touch it, the scanner exploded in a shower of sparks. The science officer collapsed to the floor, his crystalline body flickering with pain signals. "Medical team to the bridge," Commander Zix-9 shouted as he rushed to help his fallen officer. Meanwhile, in the council chamber, representatives from 12 different species gathered around a circular table. The Vorthak delegate High Curator Zen spoke first. His voice was like music mixed with mathematics. "The human ships remain an unknown factor in all our calculations," Zen said. "This threatens the stability of our entire civilization." Elder Lumina of the Luminari flickered with soft light as she responded. "The Luminari were beings of pure energy, existing as living thoughts. We have attempted psychic scans as well. Our minds cannot penetrate whatever protects their vessels." The ancient keeper, Elder Cathamore, spoke in a voice that seemed to echo from across time itself. "In all our recorded history, spanning 100,000 years, we have never encountered technology that resists all forms of observation." Dr. Elena Martinez entered the chamber with Admiral Thompson at her side. The alien representatives fell silent as the humans took their seats. Elena could feel the tension in the room like a physical weight. "Honorable delegates," Elena began, "we understand your concerns about our ships, but I assure you we mean no threat to any member of the Council." High Curator Zen's crystalline form pulsed with agitation. The threat is not in your intentions, Ambassador Martinez. The threat is in the unknown. How can we plan for peace when we cannot understand your capabilities? Admiral Thompson leaned forward. Our ships are exactly what they appear to be. Warships designed to protect humanity and our allies. We've never hidden our weapon specifications or shield ratings. But you cannot explain why our scanners fail? Elder Lumina pointed out, her energy form growing brighter with emotion. Because we don't understand it ourselves, Elena admitted. This was the truth, though not the complete truth. Our scientists are still studying the phenomenon. Back on the Wisdom's Edge, Commander Zix-9 stood over the unconscious form of Science Officer Keith. The ship's medical officer, a gentle being called Dr. Vell, ran his instruments over the patient. His neural pathways show signs of severe feedback trauma, Dr. Vell reported. It's as if his mind tried to process information that was fundamentally incompatible with consciousness itself. 6-9 looked at the destroyed scanner. How is that possible? It's just a ship made of metal and technology. Perhaps, Dr. Vell said quietly. That's exactly the problem. Perhaps what we're trying to scan isn't entirely made of normal matter. As the human fleet settled into defensive positions around Council Station Prime, other alien vessels maintained a respectful distance. Every species in the galaxy had learned the same lesson. Attempting to scan human warships was dangerous to both equipment and sanity. On the USS Liberty, Admiral Thompson stood in his ready room, looking out at the alien ships surrounding them. He touched a hidden panel on his desk, revealing a small device that glowed with an eerie light. The device looked ordinary enough, but Thompson knew better. He thought back to 3 years ago when Captain Ryan Foster's exploration mission had returned from the void between galaxies. They had brought back something that changed everything, something that made human ships impossible to scan or predict. Thompson closed the panel and walked back to his bridge. The Galactic Council wanted answers, but some truths were too dangerous to share, at least not yet. The mystery of human warships would remain unsolved for now, but Thompson suspected that wouldn't last much longer. The aliens were getting desperate, and desperate beings did dangerous things. He could only hope that when the truth finally came out, the galaxy would be ready for it. Dr. Marcus Webb walked through the quiet corridors of Council Station Prime, his footsteps echoing softly against the metal walls. As humanity's chief military scientist, he carried secrets that weighed heavier than any physical burden. Tonight, he was finally going to share the truth with someone else. He found Dr. Elena Martinez in her private quarters, reviewing diplomatic reports on her tablet. She looked up as he entered, noting the serious expression on his weathered face. "Marcus, you look like you haven't slept in days," Elena said, setting aside her work. "I haven't," Webb replied, taking a seat across from her. "Elena, there's something you need to know about our ships. Something that explains why the aliens can't scan them." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "I've been waiting 3 years for this conversation." Webb activated a small device that would prevent any alien listening equipment from recording their words. "What I'm about to tell you must never leave this room without my permission. The safety of humanity depends on it." 3 years earlier, Captain Ryan Foster stood on the bridge of the USS Pioneer, humanity's first deep space exploration vessel. The ship was further from Earth than any human had ever traveled, drifting in the empty void between galaxies where no stars shone. "Captain, we're detecting something on long-range sensors," reported Lieutenant Commander Karen Hayes, the ship's science officer. "It's artificial, but the readings are strange." Ryan moved to look over her shoulder at the scanner display. "Strange how? The object appears to be there and not there at the same time," Karen explained, her voice filled with confusion. "It's like our sensors can't decide if it exists or not." The object they found was a derelict vessel unlike anything in human records. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of their own ship, but it seemed to bend light around it in impossible ways. Parts of it appeared solid, while other sections looked transparent, as if they were made of crystallized space itself. "Take us closer," Ryan ordered. "But keep our distance. I don't like the look of that thing." As the Pioneer approached, the crew began to notice strange effects. Clocks started running at different speeds in different parts of the ship. The computer systems began processing data in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Some crew members reported seeing colors that had no names. Dr. Karen Hayes led a small team aboard the alien derelict. They wore full environmental suits and carried every scanning device humanity had invented. What they found inside defied all understanding. The corridors seemed to extend further than the ship's exterior dimensions, Karen reported over the radio. According to my measurements, we've walked 3 kilometers inside a ship that's only 2 kilometers long. The derelict appeared to be empty, but it wasn't dead. Something lived within its impossible walls, something that existed before the universe had settled into its current rules of physics. The entity they encountered wasn't malicious, just incredibly old and tired. When it realized that humans had found it, the ancient being made a choice. Rather than face another lonely eternity in the void, it chose to die. But death for a creature from before reality had rules wasn't simple. The being didn't just stop existing. It unraveled in a way that left traces of its impossible nature embedded in everything nearby. The human exploration team, their equipment and parts of their ship became infected with fragments of pre-reality physics. Dr. Webb paused in his story, noting the pale expression on Elena's face. The entity gave us a gift and a curse, he continued. Those fragments of pre-reality physics are now part of every human warship we build. How is that possible? Elena asked. We don't fully understand it ourselves, Webb admitted, but somehow, when we brought samples of the derelict back to Earth, the effect spread to our shipyards. Every piece of metal we use to build military vessels carries traces of that impossible physics. That's why the aliens can't scan us, Elena realized. Their instruments are trying to read something that shouldn't exist according to the laws of physics. Exactly. The fragments exist outside normal reality. When alien scanners try to process that information, they overload or shut down. It's like trying to divide by zero. The math simply breaks. Back on the Zenthari research vessel, High Curator Zen of the Vorthak Collective stood over the still unconscious form of Science Officer Kith. The crystalline being's body continued to flicker with pain patterns, even hours after his failed scanning attempt. This cannot continue, Zen declared to Commander Zix-9. The Vorthak Collective is built upon perfect information and absolute prediction. The existence of something we cannot analyze threatens our very way of life. Zix-9 nodded gravely. What do you propose? We must find a way to breach their defenses, Zen replied. If we cannot scan them directly, we must find another method. Perhaps a coordinated effort using multiple species technologies simultaneously. That could be dangerous, Zix-9 warned. Look what happened to Keth with just our scanners. The risk is acceptable, Zen said, his crystalline form pulsing with determination. We cannot allow the humans to remain unknowable. It goes against everything we are. Meanwhile, on the USS Liberty, Admiral Thompson received an encrypted message from Dr. Webb. The message was short, but troubling. The Vorthak are planning something. The fragments are becoming more active. We may need to consider revealing the truth. Thompson deleted the message and walked to his quarters. Hidden behind a false wall was a small chamber containing a piece of the original derelict, a fragment no larger than his fist, but glowing with that same eerie light that defied understanding. As he watched, the fragment pulsed brighter for a moment as if responding to some distant stimulus. Thompson had noticed this happening more frequently lately, especially when aliens tried to scan human ships. The pre-reality fragment seemed to be awakening. Captain Lisa Rodriguez felt it too aboard the Stormbreaker. In her ship's engine room, Chief Engineer Steve Parker had reported strange readings from the hull plating. The metal itself was beginning to show signs of the impossible physics that protected them. Captain, I'm seeing energy patterns in the hull that shouldn't be possible, Steve reported over the intercom. It's like the ship is becoming something more than just metal and circuits. Lisa thought about the implications. If the fragments were spreading or becoming more active, what did that mean for the crews who lived and worked inside these ships every day? Dr. Elena Martinez sat in silence for several minutes after Webb finished his story. Finally, she spoke. How many people know the truth? On Earth? Maybe 20 people in the highest levels of government and military command. Out here, just you and me and Admiral Thompson. What about Captain Foster and Dr. Hayes? They were there when it happened. Webb's expression grew sad. Ryan Foster died in a shuttle accident 6 months after returning from the mission. Some say it wasn't an accident, that the fragments in his body made him incompatible with normal technology. And Dr. Hayes? She's alive, but she's changed. The exposure to the derelict affected her more than the others. She can see things that aren't there, understand concepts that human minds shouldn't be able to grasp. We keep her in a secure facility where she can continue her research safely. Elena felt a chill. Are we all at risk? Everyone who serves on these ships? We don't know, Webb admitted. The fragments seem to be contained within the ship's structure for now. But if they continue to become more active, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Elena understood the implications. Humanity had gained an incredible defense against alien scanning. But at what cost? And what would happen when the galaxy's most desperate species decided that the unknown was too dangerous to tolerate? As if reading her thoughts, Webb added, the Vorthak won't give up. They'll keep trying new methods, more dangerous approaches. Eventually something will give way, either our defenses or their sanity. Elena stood and walked to the window, looking out at the human fleet surrounded by wary alien vessels. Then we need to be ready for when that happens. In the depths of space, ancient things that should not exist continued to pulse with impossible light, waiting for the moment when the galaxy would learn that some mysteries were too dangerous to solve. Elder Lumina drifted through the energy conduits of her ship, the thought's embrace. As a being of pure consciousness and light, she could travel through any space that carried energy. Today, she carried the hopes and fears of the entire Luminari collective. The Luminari had watched the physical races fail to scan human ships with their crude instruments. Metal and circuits could not understand what lay beyond normal physics. But consciousness was different. Mind could perceive what matter could not. Elder Lumina, came the voice of her aide, spark of curiosity, speaking directly into her thoughts. The collective has approved your mission. You may attempt the psychic probe. Lumina pulsed with determination. I will succeed where others have failed. Consciousness transcends the limitations of physical scanners. On the bridge of the USS Ranger, Captain Amy Foster felt a strange tingling at the edge of her awareness. Amy was Ryan Foster's younger sister, and she had inherited his gift for sensing when something wasn't quite right. Today that gift was screaming warnings at her. Lieutenant Parker, are you detecting any unusual energy readings? Amy asked her science officer. Negative, Captain. All systems are normal. Lieutenant Tony Parker checked his instruments again, although I am picking up some unusual activity from the Luminari vessel. Amy had heard stories about her brother's final mission, though the details were classified above her clearance level. She knew that something had changed after Ryan returned from deep space, something that made human ships special. Now staring at the alien fleet surrounding them, she wondered if that change was about to be tested. Elder Lumina gathered her consciousness into a focused beam of pure thought. The Luminari had developed psychic abilities over millions of years of evolution. They could read the thoughts of most species, peer into the quantum structure of matter, and even glimpse possible futures. No secret could hide from a determined Luminari mind. She directed her consciousness toward the human ship USS Ranger, expecting to slide through its defenses like light through clear glass. At first, everything seemed normal. She could sense the human crew going about their duties, feel the warm glow of their emotions and thoughts. Then she touched something that should not exist. Deep within the ship's hull, embedded in the very atoms of the metal, Lumina encountered fragments of a reality that existed before reality had rules. Her consciousness, which had never known defeat, suddenly found itself trying to understand concepts that predated understanding itself. The fragments showed her glimpses of the universe before physics, before logic, before the very concept of existence had meaning. She saw colors that had no names because they existed before light was invented. She felt emotions that came from beings who lived before the idea of feeling was created. Lumina's psychic scream echoed through every luminary mind within 1,000 light years. Captain Amy. Foster clutched her head as pain shot through her skull. Around her, several crew members staggered as the psychic feedback washed over them. Even the ship's systems flickered as the impossible energies from the Luminari probe interacted with the pre-reality fragments in the hull. What the hell was that? Amy demanded, fighting through the lingering headache. Unknown energy discharge from the Luminari vessel, Lieutenant Parker reported, his voice strained. Captain, I'm reading massive power fluctuations throughout their ship. I think something went wrong. On the thought's embrace, Elder Lumina's consciousness writhed in patterns that hurt other Luminari to observe. She had returned from her probe, but she was no longer the same being who had left. Elder Lumina, Spark of Curiosity called out in growing alarm. Please respond. The collective needs to know what you discovered. When Lumina finally spoke, her words came in concepts that had no translation into normal language. She described geometries that folded in on themselves before they existed, spoke of mathematics that solved themselves by becoming the questions they were meant to answer. The humans carry pieces of the before time, Lumina said, her energy form flickering with impossible colors. Their ships are wounded reality, bleeding the not is into the is. The other luminary recoiled from her words. Spark of Curiosity felt his own consciousness begin to strain as he tried to understand what his elder was saying. Elder, you're speaking in paradoxes. Please try to explain in terms we can understand. Lumina's form pulsed with what might have been laughter or madness. Understanding is the trap. The humans have found the place where understanding goes to die, and they have brought pieces of it home. Dr. Marcus Webb received the urgent transmission from the luminary vessel within minutes of the failed psychic probe. The message was simple but alarming. Elder Lumina has been compromised by contact with your ships. We declare human vessels to be perceptual hazards and demand immediate explanations. Webb rushed to Admiral Thompson's quarters aboard the USS Liberty. He found the Admiral staring at the hidden fragment of the original derelict, which was now glowing brighter than ever before. The fragments are reacting to the scanning attempts, Webb said without preamble. First the Zenthari equipment overloaded, now the luminary psychic probe has driven one of their elders insane. Thompson nodded grimly. I felt it when it happened. Every fragment on every human ship pulsed at the same moment. Whatever those things are, they're connected to each other. We need to warn the other ships, Webb said. If the fragments are becoming more active, the crews could be in danger. Already done, Thompson replied. I've ordered all ships to monitor their hull integrity and report any unusual readings immediately. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker, Chief Engineer of the human fleet, was discovering just how active the fragments had become. In the engine room of the Stormbreaker, he watched in amazement as the hull plating began to show energy patterns that defied every law of physics he knew. Captain Rodriguez, he called over the intercom. You need to see this. Lisa arrived in the engine room to find Steve standing before a section of wall that seemed to be breathing. The metal expanded and contracted in a slow rhythm, and strange lights danced beneath its surface. How long has it been doing this? Lisa asked. Started about 10 minutes ago, right after that energy pulse from the luminary ship, Steve replied. Captain, I don't think this is just metal anymore. It's like the ship is becoming something alive. Lisa reached out to touch the wall, then stopped. Something in her gut told her that direct contact would be a very bad idea. Get a full scan of all hull sections. I want to know if this is spreading. On the luminary vessel, the collective made a desperate decision. Elder Lumina was quarantined in an isolated chamber, where her impossible thoughts couldn't contaminate other minds. But the damage was already done. Her psychic scream had carried fragments of the paradoxical knowledge to every luminary within range. Across the collective, beings of pure thought found themselves thinking thoughts that shouldn't exist. Some began speaking in colors, others started solving mathematical equations by becoming the numbers themselves. The luminary, who had always prided themselves on perfect logic and reason, discovered that some forms of knowledge were toxic to rational minds. High Curator Zen of the Vorthak received reports of the luminary crisis with growing desperation. The crystalline beings had built their entire civilization on the foundation of perfect information and prediction. If even the psychic luminari couldn't penetrate human defenses, what hope did anyone have? We must try a different approach, Zen declared to his fellow curators. If direct scanning fails, perhaps we can learn their secrets through temporal analysis. The other Vorthak flickered with concern. Temporal manipulation is dangerous, High Curator. The risk of ignorance is greater, Zen interrupted. We cannot allow these humans to remain unknowable. It threatens the very foundation of rational existence. Dr. Elena Martinez stood in the council chamber, facing a room full of increasingly agitated alien representatives. The news of the luminary incident had spread quickly, and now every species was demanding answers. Ambassador Martinez called out the Keeper's representative, Elder Kethmore. Your ships have now caused permanent damage to one of the galaxy's most revered minds. How do you explain this? Elena took a deep breath. We warned you that our ships resist scanning attempts. We never intended for anyone to be harmed. But you cannot explain why, accused High Curator Zen. You ask us to trust what we cannot understand, to accept what we cannot analyze. This goes against everything we are. Elena looked around the chamber at the assembled aliens, some of the most advanced minds in the galaxy, all united in their fear of the unknown. She realized that humanity stood at a crossroads. They could continue hiding the truth and risk escalating conflicts, or they could reveal their secret and face the consequences. What if I told you that we don't fully understand it ourselves? Elena said quietly. What if the reason we can't explain our ships is because they carry pieces of something that exists beyond explanation? The chamber fell silent. For the first time, Elena had offered them a glimpse of the truth, and every alien present felt a chill of fear at what that truth might mean. In her isolated chamber, Elder Lumina continued to speak in impossible concepts, describing a universe where effect preceded cause and where Elder Kethmore of the Keepers floated in his temporal meditation chamber, surrounded by devices that could peer through time itself. As the oldest known being in the galaxy, he had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. If anyone could solve the mystery of human ships, it would be him. The ancient Keeper had lived for over 100,000 years, accumulating memories that spanned entire epochs of galactic history. His people, the Keepers, were the living libraries of the galaxy, recording and preserving everything that had ever happened. They had never encountered anything they couldn't eventually understand through careful observation across multiple timelines. Begin temporal sequence, Kethmore commanded his instruments. I will observe the human vessels from multiple timeline perspectives simultaneously. The temporal manipulation device hummed to life, creating a bubble of altered space-time around the Elder Keeper. From his perspective, he could now see the human fleet as it existed across past, present, and potential future moments, hoping to find some timeline where their secrets were revealed. At first, the temporal scan proceeded normally. Kethmore observed the human ships arriving at the station, saw their crews going about their duties, watched the various scanning attempts by other species. Everything appeared as expected until he tried to peer deeper into the ships themselves. The moment his temporal perception touched the pre-reality fragments embedded in the human hulls, something went catastrophically wrong. Captain Amy Foster was conducting a routine inspection of the USS Ranger when reality suddenly fractured around her. For a split second, she saw herself as a child, as an old woman, and as someone who had never been born, all at the same time. The corridor she was walking through existed in past, present, and future simultaneously. All hands, report status immediately, Amy called over the ship's intercom, fighting off the disorientation. Throughout the human fleet, similar temporal distortions rippled through every vessel. On the USS Liberty, Admiral Thompson watched in alarm as his ready room briefly existed in 3 different time periods at once. The pre-reality fragments in the ship's hulls were reacting to the temporal probe, creating paradoxes that spread outward like cracks in glass. Elder Kethmore screamed, a sound that echoed backward and forward through time itself. His consciousness, stretched across multiple timelines, suddenly found itself trying to process memories of events that had never happened. He remembered his civilization being destroyed by entities carrying the same energy signature as the human ships. He recalled fleeing from beings that existed outside time, beings that brought chaos to ordered reality. But these were false memories, paradoxes created when the temporal probe encountered the fragments of pre-reality physics. The Keeper's mind, which had safely stored 100,000 years of accurate history, was now contaminated with memories of events that existed in the space between what was real and what was possible. Emergency temporal shutdown, shouted Keeper Technician Veltar, as he watched his elder's life signs spiral into impossible patterns. Kethmore is experiencing timeline cascade failure. The temporal manipulation device powered down, but the damage was already done. Elder Kethmore's memories now contained contradictory histories that his mind couldn't reconcile. He remembered the human fleet both as saviors and destroyers, as beings who had helped the galaxy and beings who had consumed it. Dr. Marcus Webb burst into Admiral Thompson's ready room without ceremony. Admiral, we have a massive problem. The temporal probe attempt just caused paradoxes throughout our entire fleet. Thompson was already studying readings from the hidden fragment in his quarters. The fragment activity spiked during the probe. Whatever these things are, they don't just exist outside normal physics. They exist outside time itself. Sir, we're receiving reports from all human vessels. The crews are experiencing temporal displacement symptoms, memories of events that didn't happen, glimpses of timelines that don't exist, Webb reported grimly. How bad is it? So far manageable. But if the aliens keep trying these advanced scanning methods, the effects could become permanent. Our people could lose their grip on linear time entirely. On Council Station Prime, panic was spreading through the alien delegations. The news that even the ancient keepers couldn't safely analyze human ships sent shockwaves through every species present. High Curator Zen paced frantically in his quarters, his crystalline body flickering through rapid calculation cycles. The Vorthak Collective was built on the principle that everything could be understood through sufficient analysis. The existence of something that resisted all forms of observation threatened their entire way of life. We must find another approach, Zen declared to his aide, Curator Velkin. If direct scanning fails, if psychic probes fail, if temporal analysis fails, then we must consider more. Extreme measures. What do you suggest, High Curator? We gather the most brilliant minds from every species. We pool our knowledge and technology. We create a scanning array so powerful that it can breach any defense, reveal any secret. Velkin's crystalline form dimmed with concern. The risks could be enormous. If such a device failed like the others, then we face that risk, Zen replied firmly. The alternative is to accept that there are things in the universe that cannot be known. That is unacceptable. Captain Lisa Rodriguez received an urgent communication from Fleet Command as she dealt with the continuing strange behavior of her ship's hull. The metal walls of the Stormbreaker were now pulsing with a slow, rhythmic light that seemed almost alive. Captain Rodriguez, came Admiral Thompson's voice over the secure channel. I need you to gather your senior staff. We're calling an emergency meeting of all ship commanders. Understood, Admiral. Should I ask what this is about? The aliens are planning something big. Our intelligence suggests they're going to attempt a coordinated scan using technology from multiple species. We need to be prepared for the consequences. Lisa looked around her bridge, noting how the strange energy patterns in the wall seemed to pulse in response to her emotional state. Sir, I think our ships are changing. The fragments, or whatever they are, they're becoming more active. I know, Captain. That's exactly what we need to discuss. In the depths of space, far from the Council Station, ancient sensors detected the growing energy signature of the pre-reality fragments. These sensors belonged to entities that had been sleeping for eons, waiting for the return of the impossible physics that had once threatened to unravel their entire universe. The entities stirred in the darkness between galaxies, recognizing the familiar patterns of chaos that had nearly destroyed everything they held dear. To them, the human ships carried the scent of their oldest enemy, beings that had existed before reality had rules, beings that brought madness wherever they went. Dr. Elena Martinez met with the Council leadership in an emergency session. The alien representatives looked haggard and desperate, their confidence shattered by the repeated failures to understand human technology. Ambassador Martinez, Elder Kethmore said, his voice now carrying strange harmonics from his temporal displacement. We cannot continue like this. Every attempt to scan your ships results in catastrophe for our people. Elena looked around the chamber at the assembled aliens. Then perhaps it's time I told you the complete truth. High Curator Zen leaned forward eagerly. You admit there are secrets? You acknowledge that your ships carry hidden technology? Not hidden, Elena corrected. Impossible. 3 years ago, one of our exploration vessels discovered something in the void between galaxies, something that shouldn't exist according to any known laws of physics. The chamber fell silent. For the first time, a human was offering them real answers. We brought back samples, Elena continued. Those samples infected our shipbuilding process. Every military vessel we construct now carries fragments of physics that predate the universe itself. Predate the universe? Whispered Elder Lumina's replacement. A young luminary called Bright of Understanding. How is that possible? We don't know, Elena admitted. We only know that these fragments exist outside normal reality. They make our ships impossible to scan because they contain pieces of a universe where scanning, where observation itself, worked by different rules. High Curator Zen processed this information rapidly. If this is true, then your ships are weapons of mass disruption. They carry the power to undermine the fundamental laws that govern existence itself. We never intended them as weapons. Elena protested. The effect was accidental. Intent is irrelevant, Zen replied coldly. The danger remains. These fragments must be contained or eliminated. Elena felt a chill as she realized the implications of her revelation. She had hoped that honesty would ease tensions, but instead, she may have just declared war on the entire galaxy. Meanwhile, in the monitoring stations scattered throughout the galactic edge, long-dormant warning systems began to activate. Ancient automated messages set in place by civilizations that had died before the current galactic community was born started transmitting across all frequencies. Warning: pre-reality entities detected. Recommend immediate evacuation of all inhabited systems. This is not a drill. The Chaos Bringers have returned, but no one in the current galaxy understood these ancient warnings. Commander Tony Blake stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned USS Defiant, reading orders that would change the course of galactic history. As the youngest fleet commander in human history, he had been chosen for this mission precisely because his mind was flexible enough to handle what was coming. The orders were simple but terrifying. Dr. Webb had developed a procedure that could remove the pre-reality fragments from human ships, making them scannable again. The question was whether humanity should use it. Sir, long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures approaching from outside the galaxy, reported his science officer, Lieutenant Amy Parker. The patterns don't match any known technology. Tony felt a cold chill run down his spine. How massive? Conservative estimates suggest objects the size of small moons, sir, and there are hundreds of them. Dr. Marcus Webb stood in his laboratory aboard Council Station Prime, staring at the device that could end humanity's mysterious advantage. The quantum resonance disruptor could strip the pre-reality fragments from any human ship within range, returning them to normal metal and circuits that any alien could scan. Admiral Thompson entered the lab, his face grave. Marcus, we've received confirmation from our deep space monitoring stations. Something is coming from the void between galaxies and it's heading straight for us. The same void where Captain Foster found the derelict? Webb asked. Yes. Our xenobiologists think we may have accidentally sent out a signal when we brought those fragments back. We may have attracted something's attention. Webb looked at his device with new understanding. You think removing the fragments will make the approaching entities lose interest? I think, Thompson said slowly, that we're about to find out if our curse is actually our salvation. Captain Amy Foster received an urgent communication as the USS Ranger patrolled the outer edge of the star system. The message came from her sister ship, the USS Pioneer, the same name as the vessel her brother had commanded 3 years ago. Captain Foster, this is Captain Rodriguez of the Pioneer. We've detected incoming vessels of unknown origin. They're not using any conventional propulsion system that we can identify. Amy activated the main viewer and felt her blood turn to ice. The approaching ships were massive, organic-looking structures that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved through space like living things, pulsing with dark energy that hurt to look at directly. All ships, this is Admiral Thompson, came the fleet-wide broadcast. We are facing an unknown alien force that appears to be hostile. All vessels are to maintain defensive positions and await further orders. High Curator Zen stood in the council chamber as reports poured in from across the galaxy. The approaching entities had been detected by monitoring stations on dozens of worlds, all reporting the same thing: massive vessels that seem to consume information itself. They're not just ships, reported the Zenthari observer. Our deep space scanners detect energy patterns that suggest these entities feed on data, on knowledge itself. They consume information the way organic beings consume food. Elder Kethmore, still struggling with his temporal displacement, spoke in a voice that echoed across multiple timelines. I remember. No, I will remember. They came before when the galaxy was young. They devoured entire civilizations by understanding them completely, then consuming that understanding. Dr. Elena Martinez felt the pieces falling into place. They feed on predictability, on things they can analyze and understand completely. Then why are they coming here? Demanded Zen. Elena looked around the chamber with dawning realization. Because we sent them an invitation. When Captain Foster brought back those fragments, we accidentally broadcast a signal into the void. We told them that something from their original universe still existed. On the bridge of the USS Liberty, Admiral Thompson faced the most important decision in human history. Dr. Webb stood beside him, holding the activation key for the quantum resonance disruptor. Sir, if we remove the fragments now, our ships will become vulnerable to alien scanning again, Webb said. But they'll also become vulnerable to these approaching entities. And if we keep the fragments, then we remain unknowable, but we also remain a beacon for these things. They'll keep coming as long as the fragments exist anywhere in our galaxy. Thompson studied the tactical display showing the approaching enemy fleet. How long until they arrive? 6 hours at their current speed, reported his tactical officer. That's not enough time to evacuate the system, Thompson realized. We're going to have to fight them here. Captain Lisa Rodriguez stood in the engine room of the Stormbreaker, watching in amazement as the ship's hull continued its impossible transformation. The metal walls now pulsed with complex patterns of light, and she could swear she heard the ship humming softly to itself. Captain, Chief Engineer Steve Parker called out, I'm reading massive energy buildups throughout the hull. Whatever these fragments are doing, they're preparing for something big. Preparing for what? I think they're getting ready to fight, ma'am. The ship is becoming something more than just a vessel. It's becoming a weapon designed to battle the impossible. The first contact occurred when the enemy fleet was still 3 hours away. Lieutenant Commander Tony Blake, monitoring communications from the USS Defiant, picked up a transmission that chilled him to the bone. The message wasn't in any language, it was pure information. Raw data that tried to rewrite itself into the receiver's minds. Any normal communication equipment would have been instantly corrupted by the transmission. But the pre-reality fragments in the human ships acted as a filter, translating the impossible message into something human minds could barely comprehend. We come to reclaim what was stolen, the message said. The chaos fragments belong to the void between worlds. Return them or face consumption. Admiral Thompson opened a fleet-wide channel. All ships, this is the Admiral. The enemy has made their intentions clear. They want the fragments that make our ships special. If we give them up, we become defenseless. If we keep them, we fight beings that have devoured entire galactic civilizations. He paused, looking around his bridge at the faces of his crew. I won't lie to you. We don't know if we can win this fight, but I know one thing for certain. We're not giving up without trying. Dr. Elena Martinez stood before the assembled alien delegates one final time. Honorable representatives, humanity faces a choice that will determine the fate of our entire galaxy. We can surrender the technology that makes our ships unknowable, or we can use it to fight beings that threaten every thinking species in existence. High Curator Zen's crystalline form flickered with rapid calculations. You're asking us to trust in something we cannot understand to save us from something we cannot comprehend. Yes, Elena replied simply. Sometimes the unknown is the only weapon that works against the incomprehensible. Elder Kethmore spoke with the voice of someone who remembered futures that hadn't happened yet. I have seen what these entities do to civilizations they can fully analyze. They don't just destroy, they unmake. They erase entire species from existence by understanding them so completely that the universe forgets they ever existed. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. But if we fight alongside the humans, Kethmore continued, if we stand with beings who carry impossible physics, then we become unknowable by association. We become too chaotic for the entities to fully analyze. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in galactic history, every species in the Council agreed to trust in mystery rather than understanding. As the enemy fleet entered the star system, the human warships took point positions in the defensive formation. The USS Liberty, USS Ranger, USS Stormbreaker, and USS Defiant spread out in front of the alien vessels, their hulls now glowing with the soft light of pre-reality fragments. Captain Amy Foster watched her scanner displays as the enemy approached. Tony, are you seeing this? The enemy ships are analyzing everything they encounter. Every asteroid, every piece of space debris, they're consuming the information and then the objects just disappear. I see it, Amy, Tony Blake replied from the Defiant. They're trying to understand everything so completely that it stops existing. But look what happens when they try to scan us. The enemy vessels had turned their attention to the human fleet, unleashing scanning beams of incredible power. But when those beams struck the ships carrying pre-reality fragments, something unprecedented happened. The beams didn't penetrate or overload. They simply stopped existing, erased by contact with physics that predated the concept of scanning itself. Admiral Thompson smiled grimly as he watched the enemy's confusion. All ships, this is it. We're going to show these things what happens when the unknowable meets the incomprehensible. The battle began not with weapons, but with impossibility itself. As the human ships moved to engage, the pre-reality fragments in their hulls sang with energies that had no names, creating zones of chaos where the normal laws of physics simply gave up trying to apply themselves. For the first time in eons, the entities that fed on information encountered something they could not digest. The human ships had become living paradoxes, carrying pieces of a universe where their enemies' feeding methods simply didn't work. Dr. Elena Martinez spoke into her personal log as the battle raged around.